Hi, welcome to Women's Radio 2. Once again, I'm here with Christine Baumgartner, our relationship expert. And today we have a juicy topic I bet you can relate to. It's called Overwhelmed, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And whether that is what we're feeling or what someone is feeling that we're talking to, you can usually tell what's going on pretty quickly. So we're going to talk about ways for it not to be ugly or bad, and what we can do about it. Now, welcome, Christine.
Hi, Pat. It's so lovely to talk to you. And boy, we've certainly talked about how we've felt that ways in our lives and how the other people in our lives have felt that way too. And then if both people are feeling that way at the same time, forget it. It's over. Game over. Then there's two-year-olds or teenagers in the room and the adults have left town. There's no adults left.
Yes, it can often be like that. And we were talking about I had a conversation like that today. So it's perfect that you came with that example.
Yeah, it's and when you're feeling overwhelmed, it's really hard to recognize it. It really is. It's such an overwhelming feeling to feel overwhelmed. And I have trouble noticing and sorting it out. I remember one time my mom's friend, we just adored her. Her name was Gloria. And her daughter was like 2 or 3. And she just got so upset about something. She just threw herself on the floor and was having a complete fit. My mom used to call it having a fit and falling in it. And we all were just watching. Wow, what is Gloria going to do? Gloria laid on the floor and kicked and screamed at the same time. And her kid went, it caught her so off guard. But then she calmed down enough to say, what's really going on? So
Uh-huh.
there can be tools if you're not feeling overwhelmed at the same time as the other person, that you can help the other person break the cycle, because often overwhelmed just begets more overwhelmed, begets more
All
overwhelmed.
right.
And the more overwhelmed you feel, the more overwhelmed you feel. I mean, really, we've all been there. And it seems like there's no stopping. It's this horrible spiral that just will take us out and
Exactly.
anybody else that crosses our path. And heaven forbid it's another overwhelmed person that crosses your path, because then there's a lot of screaming and crying and words often said that you don't really mean. I think that
Right.
happens a lot. Don't you think that happens a lot when you're
Yes.
overwhelmed?
And sometimes it does, unfortunately, bring out a part of our personality we normally keep under wraps.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and we started our conversation today by saying, well, how did you handle it? How did you feel this way or whatever? And I noticed, I think I admitted, I noticed that I had felt in the conversation, this was a few days ago, that that person was being very disrespectful, was making assumptions, and I had never ever seen him in that state before. I guess that's the issue. So I thought the best thing I can do is to close my mouth. And try and back off and see if I can get some perspective on it, which I think I did. And then we had another conversation today, and I think it's also a learning thing. I mean, some people have a completely different personality than you do, and they react differently. So you have to have a little give and take there somewhere, I think.
I think you're really right.
I think that's what
So,
you were trying to say.
yes. So to address what you said, that if you're feeling overwhelmed and and if you can at all realize, I think I'm feeling overwhelmed, because this is how I act when I'm feeling overwhelmed. I feel like I want to throw myself on the floor and have a tantrum. And the other person's, you see, it seems that they're, and you said he even said that he was overwhelmed and he feels like he should throw himself on the floor and have a tantrum. That if one person, which you did, you went, okay, I know what I can do when I'm overwhelmed. That's gonna I'm not gonna feel good after. If I do this, it's gonna feel really good in the moment. It's gonna feel really awful later. So I'm gonna not say anything.
Right.
So deciding to not say anything, even though you have the best comeback and you're really so mad and you know he's misunderstanding you and he's saying the wrong things,
Hmm.
having a cool head prevail, which you did, you went, it'll only just make things worse. I'll feel worse. It's not going to help. Even though I really want to have my say, even though I know I'm right and he's wrong, to stop yourself is so impressive. It is so impressive. I mean, we're going to talk about how to not get to that place. When you're in the middle of it, you get blindsided. You to stop talking, just stop talking is amazing because you think you're going to explode, but you really will feel worse. Most people feel worse after, and then it's not worth it.
Right. You're going to teach us some things that we could say instead of either just being quiet or coming back with a tart remark.
Yes, tart. The not kind of fun, sweet kind of tart, the very sharp, bitter kind of tart.
Right.
So yes, if you are in the middle of that and you stop and you don't say anything, and the other person, so you need to have this being important enough to you to not lash out at them for whatever reason that's important enough to you. And if this is that's the person that's important to you in business or personal, you really need to not lash out. So if they're saying they're overwhelmed, often just them saying they're overwhelmed starts to help. And then if you could say back, wow, you really are overwhelmed. Oh my God. When you're wanting to go, but I'm
Knowledge.
overwhelmed and I should be saying I'm overwhelmed. And how come they're not understanding? I'm just saying, if you could do this, if one of you could do this, it's amazing. It's not easy. It's hugely rewarding. And it's a great thing to practice to go, wow, you really are feeling overwhelmed, because are overwhelmed, it doesn't take away all the outside stuff and the inside, but I'll tell you, it makes a helpful difference to go, you see, oh my God, you really do see.
Right.
And
And then
so
people feel gotten that way.
they almost feel like they're on my side. Wow, really, they're getting me,
Right.
even if you're still seething inside. But what'll happen is, often, if they're a reasonable person, they'll calm down. They'll calm down because when we like feeling got, we often stop protesting that you're not hearing how overwhelmed I am, Pat. You're just not. You need you to hear it. And so you go, yeah, here, wow, overwhelmed. Wow. Sounds really hard. Wow.
Right.
That they might get to a place where you could then have the conversation about, well, sounds like you can't do the thing for me. And you know what? They'd be open now to hear, I'm pretty darn overwhelmed too. And it's probably going to be a good thing for me to not do it. When can we do this?
Right. Right.
This is, and what the thing is you're now learning, you're finding out, because at first you're thinking, oh, they're being totally unreasonable. Maybe not. Maybe they're a reasonable person and not reasonable when they're overwhelmed. But when you acknowledge they're overwhelmed, they're a reasonable person. If they have it inside of them, it might come back. It might come back.
Right.
So that's if you're in the middle of it. What's really important is, how do you get to that place? Generally, there's things that add up, pile on. We use all those words. There's too many things. So learning what's too many things for you. You need to look at what you're doing, actually physically doing, jobs, caring for somebody, as well as what are you not doing for yourself. So first, write down everything you're doing. I know I don't have any time because I'm so overwhelmed. Take 5 minutes to write it all down and go, oh my God, what can I not do right now? What can wait till an hour from now? What can wait really till tomorrow? What could I delegate for another person? Because we just, women especially, we just keep piling on and piling on and piling on. We want to be helpful. We want to be productive. And we wear ourselves out unknowingly. We don't do this consciously very well. So that's
No,
why I'm
and
saying write it down.
we also put ourselves in a bad situation where we can't deliver what we want to, and then we wonder why we put ourselves in that precarious position. I know that I've done that.
And one of our previous ones, we talked about this, how women aren't always very good about going and saying, I need help, or I'm going to miss the deadline, or I need more information. Where generally most men, as this one did, can't do it. We worry a lot about people's feelings, which is lovely and detrimental. I like that we care about other people's feelings. It can't be to our own demise.
I think that's, you're saying all the things I think all of us need to hear. And I'm sure I always believe they're the right words that you can say. Sometimes you have to practice them ahead of time, or you have to be given that information ahead of time. So you say, oh, I could do that if I get in that situation. I could say that. But if you don't know what it is that you could or should say in a situation like that, um, even your body language will give you away. So sometimes it does take a little practice to be able to do that
Practice.
well.
Practice is very important. And not only it's important to learn the words to say to the other person, the words to us, hun, to yourself, hun, you're exhausted. You are wearing yourself out. I mean, how you would talk to your best friend, your best friend, the person who you have their back, she has your back. You could call her three. You moved in with a friend when your house, you couldn't stay in your house. That kind of a person, how would you talk to them if you watched them doing this to their life? You go, hun, too much. Let's talk about it. Tell me how horrible and awful it is. And then let's see if there's something you could do different. How can you do this differently? How can you get to bed earlier? How can you make sure you're eating enough food during the day? How can you delegate? Let's puzzle it out together. Because when you're in the middle of it, it's really hard to think of options, which is really nice to have another person. But if you don't have another person, then speaking to yourself in this kind, because I'll tell you what we go to when we're overwhelmed. God, you're just lazy. You're not getting enough. All those words that, however, somebody spoke to us when we were growing up that was unkind, we are excellent at that. Well, you should be able to get all this done. And I can't believe you figured out you couldn't do that. I'm like, but you would look at your friend and go, no, this is a very reasonable, realistic thing that happened because you were overwhelmed.
Yeah.
First, you're acknowledging, I'm overwhelmed. I really am overwhelmed. How do I get myself not overwhelmed? What can I personally do differently? How do you include other people? Because if you do that more regularly, the times that you're overwhelmed will go down. It won't happen and it won't last so long because we'll have tools. Oh, right. I haven't, when your kids were little, there were times you're like, you need some outside time. I mean, they're racing around in the house and they're crazy people, and you're like, go. I don't care what you do. Just go outside. You have to go outside. Don't come back. Look at the clock through the kitchen window. You can't come back for an hour. I don't care what you do. Even if you went and sat on the porch, because they're not gonna. There's gonna be a ball out there or another kid. And then they'd come back feeling better because they got all that energy out. Well, we need to do that to ourselves. Do you need to go for a walk? Set a timer, 10 minutes. I can't go to the gym for an hour. Okay, walk around the block for 10 minutes. 10 minutes.
Well, you can't tell a business associate that. So if you're in a conversation like that, and especially if there's a male female thing going on.
Yeah.
I think most women feel really shut out, put down if there's
Mhm.
a guy that's doing that. I think that it is a bit harder to be that bigger person, so to speak, or the understanding one, et cetera, et cetera. But all things come with practice. And
For sure.
so, what are some of the right what are some of the right words that people can say? You pointed out that you can say, "Oh, I can see you are overwhelmed." So acknowledging somebody else being overwhelmed when they've actually said those words is really a good thing, right?
Both men and women, I teach both men and women, whatever the other person is saying, say it back. Wow, that's really frustrating. Wow, that you're really overwhelmed. Wow, you didn't feel prepared. Wow, I was asking too much of you. It's not that you're saying you did anything wrong.
Right. It's just that you've walked in at a time when they had way more on their plate than they could adjust to.
Mhm. And it could be that they're completely wrong. They're completely mistaken, but they can't hear that before you tell them, I see how you're feeling right now, this minute. That's the
Right.
thing. Everybody needs to hear, I hear how you're feeling right now, this minute. One person needs to do that because it will, if they're a good person, a reasonable, rational person, most of the time, they will listen. Now, there's diagnosable people out there, sociopaths, psychopaths, narcissists. They this won't work. It won't work. I mean, I have a
Yeah.
couple other things you can do if you really are in a committed relationship and you don't want to leave for a bunch of reasons. It's a different conversation. But the majority of the world is not like that. They just get bristly, oversensitive, unreasonable,
Overbearing. The word comes to
overbearing,
things out most of the
irrational.
time.
So if both people are like that, you can, if you've had a conversation ahead of time, if you're in an ongoing relationship, business, or personally, you go, boy, if this ever happens, we need to go to our separate corners. What they do in a boxing ring, they separate them for a moment.
Right.
Let's go. We're going to go to our office. We're going to take a time out for 10 minutes. And if you don't have that arrangement and it happens, though, then you do this mirroring thing where you say, and then you say, boy, if that ever happens again, we need a plan. This is if you're talking to a reasonable, most of the time person.
Right. So wait a little while and go back and say, I could see you were really overwhelmed, and I did not realize I was just adding
Mhm.
fuel to the fire, as it were, at the time. And I totally agree. I think we ought to back off of that, and we'll come back to it later or whatever, however you can give that person space to and act understanding, right?
Because
Well,
it's
I think this is might be an ongoing conversation. I would really like to hear from some people if they've been in conversations like this with people they work with, if it's male, female oriented. I think the dynamics are also different and difficult. So I'd love to hear from some of the audience, wouldn't you?
oh, I would, because I don't know anybody, even Mother Teresa and Gandhi, before they got to their more spiritual centered place, had these moments, which is what led them to get to their more spiritual place. Most of us mere mortals have had this happen a lot, a few, a bunch. So why not figure out, wow, how do I get there? Is there a way to prevent it happening so much? And then when it's happening, what can I do to de-escalate? Because when you're feeling it, it just gets more. And when there's two of you feeling it, it just gets more. So the
Right.
de-escalating is a very good tool to learn.
Well, we'll return to this. I think we're running out of time for today, and so
Oh,
we
well.
won't feel overwhelmed. But I'm really, really glad that you chose this topic. It couldn't be more timely from my perspective, and I hope that it's been right on for a lot of our audience too. As always, these are just enlightening conversations. I so appreciate your being here and tackling some of the hard conversations people need to have. So thank you.
And so how would they reach us, Pat, if they wanted to send us a comment or a question?
Absolutely. Well, a good way is by email. Womensradio@gmail.com is very, very good. We'll have some other ways coming up soon so that they have all alternatives to that, but certainly in the
Pat's got some exciting things in the works.
we hope. I think so. Yeah.
Trying to not have you feel overwhelmed while you're doing it, huh?
Well, we've gone at a slower pace than I usually like to go, but I think it's all for the best. And we are now trying to reach both the men in the cultural creative group as well as the wonderful women who are there. And part of that is came from inner direction that it's time for men of good heart and women of good heart to come together to try and work together to solve some of the issues that are going on in our world right now, where we can make a big difference.
I have men tell me
Chris-
every day they wish they knew how to do this, which is why they show up to talk to me.
And it's the reason we do it here. And I think that communications is everything, and that we could solve a lot of problems if we just have little tools like this to help us along at the right time. So
You're
thank you.
so helpful to
you do.
keep spreading this information, Pat. Thank you.
Well, you're so great to keep coming back and letting us talk and talk and talk more about it. I don't think it's all going to happen in one conversation. So I'm
No, but
really,
just
really happy you're willing.
cracking open the door. I think that's the important thing. They just go, oh yeah, I see that that's a problem. What could I personally do about it? That's the kind of
Right.
conversation we want everybody to start having.
Well, we will be back again next week. Thank you very, very much for joining us once again, and we'll look forward to it.
Bye for now.